here's what we're going to do. I'm going to give a brief introduction of the bill, which I'm sure most of y'all have all heard about. And then I have an amendment for the bill, which will likely take into account some, but certainly not all, of the concerns I have heard. It is my intention to move the bill through committee today, and then to continue to work with parties as we move forward. So that's the chair's intention. We can certainly talk and have some discussion about that, but I wanted to let y'all know where I was headed. But this is not one of those, hey, let's get it through, and then, hey, can we get it on the floor tomorrow? That's not what we're doing here. So we'll continue to have those conversations. The bill deals with occupational licensing reform largely as it relates to the administration of those boards. We have a plethora of boards in the state of Alabama, and there are some inherent inefficiencies with having that many different boards with different operations and different bureaucracies that accompany those siloed operations. So what we have done is looked at other states and how other states handle their occupational licensing and how they've streamlined them and the savings and results that have come out of that. We've looked at states like Florida and Georgia and Virginia and others. Way back when I was in college in Virginia, I had the opportunity to work at a state agency in Virginia that did occupational licensing and had all of the occupations up under one roof and very little staff. And there was a tremendous amount of savings to the licensee, to our constituents. Now, I would hazard a guess that you're not going to see a lot of those licensees in the hallways, and you're not going to see a lot of those licensees talking to you. You will instead see their representatives, and you will instead see board members, and you may even see some staff that certainly have a vested interest in things staying just like they are. But I do think that it is incumbent upon us from time to time to look at how we do things and ask, is there a more efficient way to do this? Is there an opportunity to do this in a manner which will benefit our constituents a little bit more? Now, we've got another 45 minutes or so to have this discussion, and I want everybody that wants to be heard to be heard. So we're going to open a public hearing on this. I would say this, I would hazard to guess that a lot of y'all just simply don't want to be messed with. You want to leave it just like it is, and you're perfectly happy with it just like it is. And I understand that. I would just say that if that's the case, and somebody's already said they want to be left out, and you want to just plead your case for the board of whatever to just not be included in the bill, I hear you. It's noted. And we'll go from there. Actually, before I start the public hearing, I'd like to get the amendment adopted, and then we can get to a public hearing. So I'm going to offer this amendment, and Senator Kelly's going to second it. And it deals with the State Board of Public Accountancy, the State Banking Department, the Peace Officer Standard and Training Commission, the Securities Commission, and the Department of Insurance. I'm getting there. It excludes those aforementioned boards from this act, from this bill. Why these and not others? I'm going to finish the amendment, Senator, and then I will get into answering questions, if that's okay. So it excludes the Board of Accountancy, the Banking, the Peace Officer Standing and Training Commission, the Securities Commission, the Department of Insurance. It further deals with some language that was in the original bill that allowed the investigators to be sworn. That was a concern by a number of our law enforcement folks. So they are just going to be investigators. They don't have any sworn powers or anything like that. And then it includes some other language that deals with some records and other things like that. So that's the amendment. And Senator Coleman Madison, you had a question.
Yes, sir. I just wanted to know, because you started out by saying, I know that there are some of you who want to just be excluded. Mm-hmm. So I know, because this morning somebody came to me and said, I'm like, well, why just you guys? So the question I'm asking is, why just these guys? The other question is, first of all, is why the need for this bill? Do we feel that the system is broken and is not working, or what has happened that precipitated bringing this?
Okay, so
sitting on Sunset, I'm just wondering.
I understand. So I think in the opening I answered your second question.
Again, senior citizen.
I'm going to answer your first question. The Board of Public Accountancy came to me and made a compelling case that they should be excluded from this. And frankly, it's tax season, and I wanted those folks to get back to work, and we'll deal with them at a later time. The banking department and the Securities Commission and the Department of Insurance all have very specialized relationships that are intergovernmental and even related to their interaction with the federal government as far as their licensure. And while I'm not convinced necessarily that they couldn't benefit from this streamlining, I didn't have I wanted to unpack that further before we get into that, and we may do that in subsequent sessions. But right now, it was one of those, they made a compelling argument that they had some intertwining with other federal agencies, and I needed some more time and more discussion with them to unpack that. So that's why these folks are excluded.
And you said, tell me again why you say this. You feel this is. I know you said that it was streamlined.
Mm-hmm.
Is the current system not working?
Is
it going to save money?
I think it'll save. I think it'll save licensees, your constituents, an awful lot of money. Yeah.
Okay. Do we have a fiscal note?
No.
We need a fiscal note.
Well, we'll get one. Mm-hmm. Okay. So I have a motion and a second on the amendment using previous roll without objection. Okay. So the amendment is adopted, and we're on the bill, and we're going to start with opponents that have signed up. I have first, and open this public hearing, I have first Ms. Lisa Hill from the Alabama Propane Gas Association. Good morning, Lisa.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members. How are y'all today?
Well,
Good. I apologize for not getting with you sooner.
Yes, ma'am.
I wish we had have done that. But I am Lisa Hill. I am the outgoing director of the Alabama Propane Gas Association. I've got Laurel Bunn, who is the incoming director with me, and I also have Dwayne Whidden, who is the administrator of the Alabama Liquefied Petroleum Gas Board with me. And we are here today to voice our concerns and objectives to this bill. Since 1965, the LP Gas Board has been tasked with protecting consumers, and they do that through licensing and regulating the propane industry. We are a self-funded board. We receive no money from the general fund. We collect our money from, yes, permit fees, but also the majority of it comes from a per gallon fee that is put on the wholesale sale of liquefied petroleum gases. The board is currently made up of 4 industry members, along with a consumer member that is appointed by the governor's office, along with representatives from the Fire Marshal's office, from the Department of Public Safety, and from the Public Service Commission, for a total of an 8-member board. And we also currently have 5 inspectors that are throughout the state, and we also have a chief inspector and administrator in the Montgomery office with a numerous years worth of experience and knowledge. All of these individuals, all of our inspectors and our other 2 individuals are all law enforcement officers because that is actually, unfortunately, needed in our industry every now and then. The inspectors are specialized in the propane industry when it comes to the training and their experience and what they need to know when they go out to look at the industry. So they're regulating it by doing inspections on propane delivery vehicles, on bulk plant facilities, dispensing facilities, and any incident that could possibly be related to propane. The State Fire Marshal's office uses our inspectors all the time when it comes to investigating different things. The LP Gas Board does require we have many different classes of permits, and those are needed in the state. We also do have the employees that handle propane or work on propane equipment must go through different testing. You must understand how important that is for us as an industry to have these people have permits and then to make sure that these people are properly trained. The last thing that you want is for my industry to send an individual who works for us to your mother's house, a family member's house, and them not know what they're doing. Because unlike a haircut, we can kill somebody if we do not train our employees correctly. And to do that, we need our board, we need our specialized inspectors and knowledgeable administration in the office to be able to do that. I've been here 27 years, and in 27 years, this board has never, and you can go back and check it, received a significant finding during the sunset review, which I think speaks volumes to how this board has been managed. So that said, we're kind of pleading with you right now that yes, we do want to keep our board. We're more than happy to talk to you about some efficiencies or things like that, even though I think that we very much run, not me, but the board very much runs our board efficiently, and I think that we're very good for consumers, and to get rid of our board would be very detrimental to Alabamians.
Ms. Hill, thank you so much for your comments, and I appreciate you bringing them mainly to shed some light on some misconceptions about the bill that's in front of us today. So this bill doesn't do away with the board. It doesn't make any changes whatsoever to your board. And to say otherwise is inaccurate. This bill certainly continues to allow and encourage the employment of inspectors and even specialized inspectors. It just streamlines those back office activities, if you will, under one central spot, which at this point is the Secretary of State's office, which already does a lot of business services right now. So there's still inspections. The board that is still there can still set standards for those inspectors, testing for those inspectors, permits and issue permits, and can still provide the public safety that it's doing now. So I took notes on each and every comment that you made, from public safety to board makeup to inspectors to need for permits and the testing, all of which are still there. Okay. It's just streamlining the back office activities so that we can have some more efficiency. So it's important to note for you and for committee members and others, this doesn't do away with any of that. Mm-hmm. It's simply streamlining.
Yes, sir, and thank you for pointing that out. And I will just say one more time that I really do think that our permit amounts are set by law. It's in the law. We can't raise that without coming before you and giving you a reason to. So all of that set, I don't think we go overboard on our fees, but I understand, and I think that our board is efficient. But thank you very much for hearing me out.
Thank you, Ms. Hill. Senator Coleman.
I just want could you define back office activities?
Sure, that's a perfectly reasonable question. So let's talk about when you issue a license. Okay, so I'm gonna apply to be a whatever occupation. Okay, so I'm coming in. Typically, there's going to be a staff member that's going to review that application. Do you have insurance? Do you have the required testing or training? Do you have, and it varies, of course, right, from board to board. What are you required to have? All of those requirements are set by the board, which continues to be in place. So that initial activity is going to be, hey, do you meet the requirements set by the board for licensure? Fairly easy to do. Yes, you've got it. No, you don't. Okay. The nice thing about a streamlined scenario is I can do that for cosmetologists as well as for electrical contractors. I can check, do they have what they need to have? Are they meeting the requirements set by the board? And again, the board's still there. Let's go to investigations real quick, or inspectors, okay? So you're going to have a central place where complaints are lodged, whether that's either online or by phone. Both of those things are possible. So you can call in. The person taking that call or receiving that complaint can funnel that to where it needs to go, but you don't have to have that duplication in every single separate board and it's every single separate silo. As far as investigations go, there are specialized investigators, certainly, no doubt about it. But one that investigates cosmetology may also be able to investigate violations for other boards as well, just as easily. And then if you have more specialized investigators, like the Alabama Propane Gas Association has, maybe you have a guy in this organization that continues to do those investigations in a very specialized manner, but you may not have to have the associated bureaucracy with them.
So you're saying the Secretary of State would contract with if they need.
Yeah, a contractor hire, it certainly doesn't preclude an outside contract. That may be even more efficient for the Secretary of State to do that. But what it means is you don't have to have these separate bureaucracies of executive directors, administrative assistants, file clerks, all of these folks. You don't have to have those duplicated, and you can realize some efficiency by having this located under one roof. Now, again, the points made by Ms. Hill are valid. We don't want to lose our board. We need to have the industry experts looking at it. We don't want to. We need to have specialized investigators. Absolutely. All of that is still absolutely allowed for in the bill. This just moves the back office, the more administrative functions, under one entity. And further, from a real estate standpoint, if you will, right? So instead of having separate offices to house the separate bureaucracies, we'll do it like we do here in committee room. We meet at 10. There's going to be another committee after us. There was one before us. So maybe you have the Board of Electrical Contractors meet at 10, and then you have the plumbing folks meet at 11, and they can all use the same table and the same chairs and the same coffee pot and maybe even some of the same admin staff. And you got to agree there's some efficiency with them doing that.
I see some of the merits. It's just that I want to make sure if we're trying to protect the licensees as well, I want to ensure that you said, but it's not going to deal with the board at all. So if they have a complaint, they go before that board. That there's a familiarity.
Same board, same reporting authorities.
Caught up into everything. What other states have this right now?
There are a variety of states, and I'll go through. They all have a different way of doing this. So there are two main methods, and I can go through a whole list of them. I mentioned some early when I talked about Virginia and Florida and Georgia. So there are really two main ways of doing this: setting up a different, separate, cabinet-appointed bureaucracy. Florida has the Department of Business Regulation, DBR. Virginia has the Department of Professional and Occupational Regulation. Georgia, and this law is modeled after Georgia's, not exactly, we've made a lot of changes to it, but it puts it up underneath the Secretary of State's office. And the reasoning for that is the Secretary of State is already performing an awful lot of business functions in that office right now. We think sometimes of the Secretary of State's office as just dealing with elections and the housing of some records, but they house all the business records too. So there's already some economy there. Again, my goal is to streamline, so there's already some economy there in the administrative functions. And again, it's important to note, we're just talking about the administrative functions here.
And I see your merits. I'm just thinking, maybe it needs to be, if that's the case, it does need to be a separate thing for the boards and nations, because there's a lot of them that are out there, and the Secretary of State office does a lot. So I don't want to overwhelm them, but I don't want to put something into an office that becomes a political football either.
And that's a perfectly reasonable point of view. Senator Coleman Madison is looking at other options. There are different ways of doing it. I've just landed on this one as the most efficient in my mind. Other questions?
I have one comment more than anything else. I believe there's some examples of some of these agencies and boards and commissions that do not, just like we heard from the LPG Gas Association, they're not, doing everything that particular board is doing. There are some boards that, from talking to the examiners, that they're almost walking into someone's house and getting receipts pulled out of a shoebox in the closet. And so there's certain boards that are out there that are not doing what we need them to do and representing their own licensors or licensees that they're giving those license to.
This won't change the board.
Yeah,
so.
but this is something that will correct and streamline that under one agency, which I would agree. There's certain boards that will need this, certain boards that we'll have to look at that might not need it, but this is a beginning point. Now, I'm going to be in favor with Senator Elliott's bill.
On this.
And I intend to do that, to continue to talk to members about this and to those impacted and affected by it. We have another member of the public. Yes, sir, absolutely, sir. Senator.
One quick question. Approximately how many boards do we have?
You know, it's funny. Somewhere between 63 and 151. So I'll get into the detail on why there's a variance there with you a little bit later, but it's a bunch of them, and it's very interesting in how the statute is set up to determine what a board really, an occupational licensing board really is. So Senator Albritton had an amendment that I incorporated in my amendment that dealt with the Department of Insurance, which you wouldn't necessarily think is an occupational licensing board, the state banking department, the Securities Commission. But depending on how you interpret the statute, you're somewhere between 63 and 161. So I'm not trying to be evasive with your question. It's just
No.
it's a little vague there. But mainly what we're talking about from the occupational licensing standpoint is those licenses that your tradespeople and professionals would have to go get in order to practice their trade, whatever it is. So it's electricians, it's contractors, it's landscape architects, it's bail bondsmen, it is auctioneers, boxers, cosmetologists. I think we got a wrestling board, which I was kind of interesting.
Massage, right?
Yep, I've heard of that one. So we've got a massage therapy board. So there is a plethora of these boards, all of whom, or most of whom, have their own little separate silos and everything else. So, Senator Gudger, I appreciate your comments.
So to be clear, what you did say in response to the last speaker was that the makeup and existence of the boards will not change.
That's correct. And the appointing authority stays the same, and the expertise associated with those boards and those that have been appointed to operate them and promulgate those rules from the board stay the same. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'm going to be very brief. Just to let you know my intention. I know your intention is to get this out today, and generally, when the chairman's intention is to get it out today, more than likely that's going to happen. But my intention is to bring an amendment, if you will allow me to do that at a later date, that excludes interior designers, the Board of Optometry, chiropractors, as well as the Board of Funeral Services. So I just wanted to make that public intention after this bill moves through the committee process.
Yes, ma'am. Yep. Senator Kelly, and then we'll come back to Senator Albritton.
To expand on Senator Grudger's remarks, would you expand on, for example, he gave the comment and example of receipts being in shoe boxes and things of that nature. So I think that's one thing that a lot of people are unaware of. So would one or either of you expand on that and the problems related to that? I think a lot of people would find that interesting.
Senator Gudger, so I don't have to be the one doing all the talking. Why don't you handle that question?
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. I think that people look, I'm going to take it from a 30,000-foot view. I think people realize that we're the elected officials and represent the people that are here. When people have to get a license from the state, they assume that they're going just like getting it from the state house that's here. But they're going through their own board, their own committee that is there. And sometimes if you're having to get a license from someone that's in a house with a kid running around there pulling out receipts out of a shoebox, and they're not doing their job or giving training or giving advice or saying this is what you need to meet the criteria for this permit, they're thinking that is government. Well, reality is that is a sub-government from us. We are different, but if we represent the people that we represent the best of our ability, I think all of these boards and commissions need to be doing the same thing to represent them, because in the end, we represent the same licensees that are asking for those permits.
So it would be fair to say that there's some of these boards that don't have a physical address or office address other than it could be in a residence, so on and so forth. Would you do that to the speaker, please?
I said
A lot of
that
folks aren't aware of that.
They would have an address, yes, but they are not in an office building as you would think that they would be, just like the liquid natural gas group is that we just talked to.
And to be clear, that's one of those things that it's not necessarily that particular board's fault. It's a very small board. They're doing the best they can. They're providing a public service, certainly, but they could certainly benefit from some back office help from some professionals that know what they're doing because they're doing it with other boards. We see other boards and complaints, and I don't want to turn this into a session of what's all wrong here, but we see other instances where meeting minutes aren't posted properly. They're not complying with the Open Records Act. They're not requiring with some public meeting requirements, things of that nature that a professional staff would benefit some of these smaller boards so that they're better off. We had one that had to be subpoenaed to provide their financial records to our examiner. Wouldn't do it. And that is something we've got to take a look at, and that's where we're headed in this direction. Guys, before I go any further, I do have another opponent, if they'd still like to speak, and I'd like to hear from them, and then we'll press on. We've got Miss Leanna Meadows from the Alabama Board of, I think that's Forestry. Yeah. Hey, how are you? Good morning.
Well, to be honest, I didn't know putting my name on there would get me right here. So, you get me.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me this morning. I'm the executive director of the Board of Registration for Foresters. I am housed in the Alabama Forestry Commission building. There's no charge for our office. There's no charge for our meetings when our boards get together. We are self-supported. We're one-person agency. I do it all. There's no back admin. I do it all. So you're not going to save money if you move me to the Secretary of State. So I think you should put me on your exempt list, and I would like to be added.
Ms. Meadows, you make your point very efficiently, and we certainly appreciate that, and I would like to speak more with you in the days to come.
Absolutely, but I would like to read you something I have from our foresters.
Okay.
Okay. I was concerned with your comments about using Georgia as your model. When we deal with Georgia, it's a nightmare. They're not efficient. They don't get back with their foresters. We've had a forester from Georgia come to Alabama, make application to take our exam. That's a 3-month process. You have to make application, then the board will meet 4 times a year, so that application gets approved. 3 months later, that person will take the exam, and they pass it, and they'll be registered. This guy came from Georgia, did all our process, took our exam, passed it, became registered in Alabama, and still had not heard from Georgia. We have a reciprocity forester from Alabama trying to get reciprocity Georgia. He sent his application in, 27 pages. That's how long it is. It's a monster. And a year later, he had not heard from the Secretary of State regarding his reciprocity, but they had immediately cashed his check. So I'm just telling you, it's going there to die. So if you're going to help our boards by putting us somewhere to die, then you're not serving the public. And that's why we're here. We're here to protect the public. I mean, we have professional licensees, and they have standards, and we regulate them. And they have to do their jobs. And that's what we're here. If you're not protecting the public, then you're not doing your job. But I thank you so much for your time.
I appreciate your comments, and I'll tell you this: when I say that it was modeled after the Georgia statute, it is in so much as its structure. But certainly, we would expect our Secretary of State to be more responsive than that. And I'll tell you this, I will look at the bill and making some statutory requirements about how quickly they have to respond so that we are serving the public. I do think that our Secretary of State's office, especially under the last administration and their Chief of Staff, who I knew very well, got much more efficient in responding to business requests. And previously, our Secretary of State's office could be for businesses quite a nightmare to navigate, and it took an awful long time. But any bureaucracy like that can make significant strides and improvements with the right leadership. I think we've got the right leadership there now, and I think and would believe they'd be very responsive to the constituents. So thank you, I appreciate it. And Senator Gudger, you had a comment.
I just had a comment. I don't know if she's here, but Rachel Riddle, are you here? Yes, I see. When's the last time?
You done with me?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
Thank you.
ma'am. Thank you for your comments, by the way. Rachel, when's the last time the legislature's done an overview? I know you do an examines every year, but as far as the legislature's done an overview of the 61 to 151 boards, has that been done in the last 10 years that the legislature's
Ms. Riddle, come on up.
May I make one comment?
Yes, sir, Senator Albrecht.
What do we do if Secretary of State doesn't want to do this?
That's a fair question. You're the legislator.
Exactly. Their duties as we decide.
They are. Thank you, Senator Albritton. Ms. Riddle.
I laughed at that because y'all give me a lot of things I don't want to do. And I do them anyway.
Thank you.
So, what was your question?
My simple question is, when's the last time the legislature's had an overview of every one of the boards and commissions, whether that's 50-something boards or 151 boards? Have we ever done that you know of?
We're required to review them every 2 years, not sunset.
I'm not talking about you and the examiners. I'm talking about the legislature actually has looked at this as a whole, as a group, and how they are. I would assume never. Is that correct?
I guess not. Like a study of how it's conducted.
That is correct.
Yes.
And the only reason I'm asking because you're the one that's there every year. So first of all, thank you for your time and effort you put into it and the information you give to us. So thank you. But I just wanted to make that point that we haven't done this before.
No, and I appreciate you bringing that up. That's something we may need to look at in the future. It's important. That's not, this bill leaves those boards alone, but there's probably some time in the future to look and see, hey, do we really need all those? Ms. Riddle, while you're up here, and I know you're so happy to be here answering these questions, but I wanted to check from an audit standpoint, do you have issues with some of these boards and their access to their records or personnel available to answer your questions when you're performing your task that we've assigned to audit these folks?
Yes. And I mean, this is just a blanket statement. Some boards do wonderful in how they conduct themselves, but we have these, whether it's for funding purposes that are making it this way. We do have some that we have to go into different types of offices to do our audits. We also have issues sometimes with some of these smaller boards for accessibility of getting them on the phone or being able to go in and do the audit. Now, all these people behind me, most of them, that's not them. They probably don't have anybody hired to be able to come up here and sit, but we do have some accessibility issues, which my assumption would be if I have accessibility issues, the public's having accessibility issues.
I would agree with that assumption. And then one other one from an ethics standpoint, are these employees of these boards, are they covered by our ethics laws that other employees would be covered by, state employees?
It depends on how they're set up, first of all, and how their boards are elected. But generally, the contracted type boards, those aren't. And the ones that have state employees and a normal type setup are covered under that. There's some variances with some individual boards and their code sections. But generally, if there's a state employee, yes. If they're contract, no.
Thank you, ma'am. Senator Hovey.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it and didn't plan on saying a whole lot, but I think we've tap danced around a thought you mentioned earlier about there being some that may or may not need to be mentioned specifically, or just some issues, some problematic boards and commissions. And you know, my only fear, you know, and I appreciate we're moving along and we want to take care of all of these institutions, but it would be interesting to see if we could tackle the awkward elephant in the room and perhaps find a way, a matrix or something to identify the problem boards and commissions and tackle them. You know, and this is all off the cuff and an observation more than anything. And I'm not trying to shift gears, but we've talked for a couple of days about the growing list of exemptions. And I think as this conversation continues, we're going to continue to see requests for exemptions, some merited, some not. But as you said earlier, they're all, you know, everyone.
All of God's children are special.
Exactly. Everyone thinks they're special, and most of them are. So I don't know, and I hate to just throw a thought out there without much prior consideration or deliberation. But you know, as this unfolds, I wonder how much of those requests for exemptions are warranted. Maybe we should really start to look at some of the problematic boards and commissions, and not have an overcorrection and an inclusion of some of these that are successfully governing themselves. Thank you. Well, anyway, I'm sorry. That's an observation and thought, and I just think we're going to get into the weeds with a growing list of exemptions as we go forward.
You're exactly right, and I think that we can continue to have that conversation as we move. So we'll continue to do that. Senator Gudger.
I make a motion to approve the bill if that's what we're voting on.
Okay, we're going to motion for favorable report as amended.
Mr. Chairman,
I'm going to second that, and then we're going to get to some more comments on the motion. Senator Coleman Madison.
Okay. I was hoping that we could kind of do what Senator Hover to kind of, before we blanket everything, I think you have a great concept. And, you know, just in Sunset, we see some of this, even in our discussion and what staff has done when they give us a breakdown of what you got and the deficiencies that you have or whether you've met these. And even when we have this conversation with them, there are things that's on there that you've not addressed and maybe been carried over. And, you know, like, okay, is this just a defiant type of thing? But it's not everybody. And what I don't want to do is to penalize the boards that are doing a great job. And at the same time, I don't want to add, we know the problem that we have. I don't want to add that over to the Secretary of State's office. I'd like to say, can we streamline this and try to get it down to where we are going? Because the end results is going to be to the licensees who apply and future people that are coming in. We want to make this an efficient service, and we want to make sure that when you go there, it is professional, because this is their livelihood. They don't understand that somebody's issuing you a license and you operating out of a shoebox. You know, and if something happened, I got to go before you, there's a complaint. Well, wait a minute, which shoebox was that, size 6 or size 8? You know, we want to make sure that we got the right people in the right place. So I'm just asking if we could.
Senator Coleman Madison, you and I have worked together well for the last 4 years, and I hope we will continue to. I think we will. You and I have co-sponsored legislation together, worked on legislation together in the past, and I will continue to work with you on this piece of legislation to address your concerns as it moves along. But it is my intention to go ahead and move forward with the motion and the second for favorable report using previous role without objection.
I'm going to not vote because I.
Okay, we're going
to work on it.
We're going to use the roll with an abstention. Okay, bill receives a favorable report. Thank you all. We're adjourned.